time to go to a sanatorium. Yes.
Everyone ready?
Ready.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to take this opportunity first to thank Ed Cardoni and Hall Walls for welcoming us here today, and invite you to go to their website, hallwalls.org, and join their mailing list, their mailing list for some great and exciting upcoming events and films. My name is Paul Morgan. I'm the coordinator of Western New Yorkers Against Conversion Therapy, or WNYACT. We're all here today to bring awareness to a harmful practice that puts our children and adolescents at risk, and to share with you the dangers associated with the junk science and harmful hoax of conversion therapy. Conversion therapy, also known as ex-gay or reparative therapy, is defined as a range of harmful, misguided, and disproven treatments that aim to change an individual's sexual orientation from homosexual to heterosexual, or from gay to straight. Some of us, unfortunately, have survived 50 years of the ex-gay movement's failures, lies, and deadly tragedies. Science, in stark contrast, has contributed to a greater understanding of human sexuality and the harmful and deplorable nature of these practices. Currently, the American Psychiatric Association instructs ethical providers to refrain from attempts to change an individual's innate sexual orientation. Not only the APA, but the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, the National Association of School Psychologists, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and many others have all declared conversion therapy harmful and discredited. WNYACT looks to join states like New Jersey and California in passing legislation protecting our children from the abusive practice of conversion or reparative therapy. To support this initiative, we look to science and we look to facts. In 2007, a task force for the American Psychological Association undertook a thorough review of existing research on the efficacy of reparative or conversion therapy. In short, what they found was that there is no clear evidence that reparative therapy does any good or works at all. And perhaps more importantly, there is significant evidence that is indeed harmful. All hate and prejudice harm the mental health of the individual by contributing to an enduring sense of stigma, causing a pervasive self-criticism through the internalization of such prejudice. In other words, if you constantly assault a person with accusations that they are damaged or flawed or less than or unsafe, they begin to believe and internalize those negative feelings. Children and adolescents are especially vulnerable to this abuse. A San Francisco State research study found that compared with LGBT young people who are not rejected by their families and caregivers with those who are highly rejected LGBT young people were more than 3 times as likely to use illegal drugs and to be at risk for HIV and STD infection. They were nearly 6 times as likely to report high levels of depression. They were more than 8 times as likely to have attempted suicide. For these reasons, WNYACT stands with all nationally recognized childhood development and mental health authorities, and we look to state and local leaders to ban this practice through proposed legislation. On a personal note, if you or an adolescent you know is struggling with gender or sexual identity issues, of bullying, or issues of abuse, we implore you to seek the guidance of a certified mental health professional. Do not be taken in by disreputable charlatans outside of the mainstream of medical science who make false claims and impossible promises. Proven therapeutic models support the individual by building self-esteem and not tearing it apart. Legitimate, certified therapy can help avert emotional crisis, avoid long-term damage, and actually save lives. Adolescence is a difficult and challenging time in the best of circumstances. LGBT youth what they need most is love, guidance, understanding, and acceptance to realize their optimal health and fullest potential. I'm honored to stand with all these individuals now. So with tremendous sense of appreciation and sincere gratitude, it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Timothy Kennedy.
Thank you very much. First of all, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. It's great to see so many people here supporting this initiative that we're undertaking. I want to thank Western New York ACT. I want to thank all of our partners, community leaders, organizations that have banded together and come together on this extremely important legislation and this important initiative that's going to have an impact not just on folks in our community and across New York State in this year and in the next coming years, but for generations to come. Vulnerable young people deserve safeguards against the harmful practice of conversion therapy, which has been shown to cause long-term damage to the physical and mental health of individuals that are subjected to it. People who have undergone conversion therapy reported increased anxiety, depression, and in some cases, suicidal ideation. The consequences of conversion therapy are devastating and long-lasting. Physicians, mental health practitioners, counselors, and many organizations that represent them have long discredited and condemned the use of conversion therapy. Joining a long list of professional organizations that have stood up to denounce this practice include the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Medical Association, the American School Counselors Associations, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National Association of Social Workers, the American Counseling Association Governing Council, the American Psychoanalytic Association, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, among others. All view conversion therapy as a disproven, discredited, harmful practice that poses serious health risks. It's time the state heed their call to protect New York's health. A recent study demonstrated the impact that this type of pseudoscience could have on adolescents. And I know Paul outlined some of those statistics. I want to reiterate some of them. There's an increased likelihood of depression and other psychological disorders, an increased likelihood of drug use, an increased likelihood of suicide because of conversion therapy. It's wrong, it's unethical, and conversion therapy has no place in the Empire State of New York. The scientific research also shows that the state should ban this disproven, ineffective, and harmful practice. Instead, here in New York, we should foster an environment of support and acceptance to celebrate the great diversity of the Empire State. California and New Jersey have already passed similar laws, and many other states, including Virginia and Washington, are undertaking similar legislation. I'm very, very proud to stand with my colleagues in the Democratic Conference to co-sponsor this legislation and push for a greater, more diverse, inclusion, and welcoming state that we can all be proud of. And with this step we're going to take moving forward, we're going to ensure equality for all New Yorkers. And I especially want to thank once again Western New York ACT and all of those that were standing here today to support this important legislation. Thank you very much.
Now, without further ado, a man who needs no introduction, but nevertheless deserves our gratitude and our thanks, New York State Assembly Member Sean Ryan.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. It's a great location at Hall Walls, and they're always very eager to help with the community. So thanks for Hall Walls for hosting us. The Western New York LGBT community has a great leadership, and it's not always the same leadership for each issue. So it seems every time there's an issue pop up, there's someone else in the leadership community who steps up and said, I'll take this issue on. So, you know, we've been pushing the gender legislation for years, and we have people here today who stepped up the leadership, played on that. And Paul Morgan stepped up to the leadership plate on the conversion therapy bill, so thank you very much, Paul, for your leadership on that. So we have great situational leaders, and that's a wonderful thing, because if everyone relies on one leader, that leader gets tired. So we have a community full of leaders, so thank you to the community of leaders that are out there today. So New York's always been a very forward-leaning state, and we want to maintain being a forward-leaning state. And one way we can do that is to ban conversion therapy in New York State. When I think of conversion therapy, I think of the bad old days. And I think of, well, they must have done that in the 50s, and that practice was extinguished. That's how I always thought about it, until just this winter, a woman came to my office to speak to me about this issue. Not much older than me. And she gave me her experiences of conversion therapy. So when she was in her late adolescence, parents told her something was wrong with her. And what was wrong was that she was a lesbian. And the parents responded by putting her in a psychiatric hospital, where she underwent electric shock therapy. And for years after, she kept being challenged by the medical community to get better. And getting better was to become a heterosexual. So for her mindset, it was as if they were telling her to quit smoking. If you're strong enough and you have the willpower, you can stop being gay. What does that do to you with your emerging adolescence into adulthood? Being told that message over and over again, that somehow that you're just not strong enough to cure yourself, and it's something you should be able to cure yourself of. But we've advanced since then, and we've recognized that people are born who they are. And no amount of therapy is going to change a spotted leopard into a striped tiger. It doesn't work that way. And that's what this gay conversion therapy is all about. So I thought it was extinguished, and she told me her very heart-wrenching story, and I said, I'm glad those days are over. And she said, those days are starting to make a comeback. There is a dedicated group of people in the United States, quack scientists, who have quack numbers behind them to say, we can change people, and isn't that good for them? But we know that it's not true. We know in our hearts that it's not accurate. It's something that's impossible to do. But one thing we can guarantee that gay conversion therapy will do, it'll torture the person who's being subjected to that therapy. And we don't want torture in New York State. We've been a leader in civil rights issues. We will continue to be a leader. We're a little bit jealous that 2 states got out ahead of us, New Jersey and California. But we're going to try to close that gap by passing that this year. And just like we have, there's leaders here, there's leaders in New York State on this issue. My Senate friends, Brad Hollyman from Manhattan is a big leader on this. My Assembly colleague, Deborah Glick, is a big leader on this. But then we have the local support. Senator Kennedy, of course, is a strong supporter. So we all join together as a community, whether it's a Buffalo community or a whole New York State community. And we join together, we hear our voices, and listen to common sense. The common sense says this should be outlawed. Nobody with any sort of license should be allowed to do this to a child. So we're going to work hard to stop it. It has no place in New York, and as long as we stay together as a community, we're going to stop it. So thank you for all being here today, and thank you for your continued support and leadership on these types of issues.
County Executive Mark Poloncarz could not be with us this morning, but he was kind enough to send a statement of support, and I'd like to read that now. Conversion therapy, which has been condemned by numerous medical and professional associations, is a harmful process that can have long-lasting negative impacts on the vulnerable adolescent population. These are people who are just beginning to identify who they are and what they believe, and at this formative time of life, they should rely on the loving support of family and friends, rather than having damaging treatments forced upon them. I stand with Western New York ACT and others in supporting legislation that will ban this practice. And now, a word from Stonewall Democrats Western New York President, and my very dear friend, Mr. Bryan Ball.
Good morning. I'd like to start off again and thank Paul Morgan and all your leadership and the great work that you and the WNYACT committee have been doing on this issue. Thank you to Ed Cardoni and Hall Walls for the use of this wonderful space this morning. And thank you, a most sincere thank you to Senator Tim Kennedy and Assemblymember Ryan for your staunch advocacy for the human dignity of all people in introducing this much-needed legislation. I stand here this morning on the behalf of Stonewall Democrats of Western New York to stand with our elected officials, concerned citizens, and professional mental health and advocacy community to support banning reparative therapy for New York's children. As has been detailed this morning, reparative therapy is a damaging process that does nothing on the victim but inflict undue psychological pain. We are all born the way we are. None of us choose our sexual orientation or gender identity any more than we choose the color of our skin or the color of our eyes. All professional medical and mental health organizations agree on this. For so-called professionals to claim they have a child's well-being in mind and tell a child that he or she was created wrong, that is wrong. It is wrong and it should be made illegal. Reparative therapy is not, as many fair-minded people may think today, a relic of an ignorant past. Today, several agencies operating in New York State are offering reparative therapy services. That is unacceptable. For each one of us who stands here today with Senator Kennedy and Assemblymember Ryan, there are hundreds, countless others who have been victimized by this process. Voices and lives, some forever silenced, who cannot be here to speak out. People who have been misled by this false science and have suffered unspeakable damage. I speak for them today. I commend our state legislature for their action and look forward to this bill's prompt passage. Our state legislature has proven that they can work together in a nonpartisan way to legislate equality and due protections in the past, and I call upon our legislature to do so again. I also call upon our community to stand with us and show the true widespread support that exists within the Western New York region and New York State for passing this legislation. I thank you all for your work and attention to this pressing issue and look forward to the day when New York's children are protected from the horrors of reparative therapy. On behalf of Stonewall Democrats of Western New York, I thank you all.
Assemblymember Ryan pointed out something I'd like to reiterate, and that is we're a city of great neighbors, but we're also a city of great situational leaders, people that step up when they see a need and are willing to put themselves out in front to be advocates for victims and those without a voice. And Ellen Brauza is one of those people, and she deserves to be thanked and patted on the back for something she's started recently, which is long overdue in this area, which is Western New York Anti-Violence Project. For too long, too many victims have fallen through the cracks of our system. And she's a tireless voice for basic civil human rights for everyone, but especially for the LGBT community. So, Ms. Ellen Brauza.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know about tireless. You could have seen me earlier this morning. Not all violence is physical violence. Just because there are no bruises, just because there are no visible scars does not mean there is no violence. To be told, whether in the name of pseudoscience or in the name of religion, that what you know about yourself is essentially wrong. Who you know yourself to be can't really be who you are. That is violence, and it creates, to tolerate this, creates a climate in which physical violence is encouraged, is permitted, is seen. These people are not quite human, then surely it's all right to beat them, surely it's all right to harass them, surely it's all right to make their lives as miserable as possible. We don't think that way, you don't think that way, but there are people out there who do. And it behooves us not to encourage or tolerate that kind of thinking, because it is harmful. It does real harm. Picking up the pieces, I've been doing that for years. I would love to get into prevention, and I think so would all of you.
Very great.
We're going to wrap up now, but I'd like to thank a few of the people that have stood with us today. First, we have a member of PFLAG here, Board Member Liz Ball, the Executive Director of GLIS, Gay and Lesbian Youth Services, Marvin Henschbarger, Board of Trustee member of Evergreen Health Services and the New York State Department of Health AIDS Institute Prevention and Planning Group, and my partner, Mark Nowak. And I'd just like to say thank you sincerely for members of the media for coming out on this bitter cold morning. Stay warm, be safe, and thank you. Anyone not get a press pass?
My wife is good. All the time.
I still like it.